Hello, Internet. So nice to see you. So, I'm always surprised how people think that music theory is mostly scale, chords, harmony, and all these kind of things. I mean, those things are important, and I teach them, and I have courses on them. So, I mean, definitely far from me to say that those things are not important or not useful. But there is a lot to be said about rhythm. There is a lot to be said about how music theory can help you with your rhythmic abilities and especially with your rhythm creativity. Okay, so I want to share you a little glimpse of that. I want to give you an idea on what music theory can do for rhythms for you right now. Okay, so let's say we have this scenario. Let's say you have a riff or a lick or something. The very least that music theory can and should be able to do for you is to take this lick and make this rhythm better or at least different, but still feel like it's related to the first lick. So essentially create variation. That's standard and legit use of music theory when you compose something or when you improvise. And this thing is typically not too hard to do, at least if you practice it and internalize it so that you can do it in real time sometimes when you improvise. Now, I'm going to show you this little technique, and I'm going to show you a lesson where I was explaining this technique. So first I'm going to show you the lesson, then we're going to come back here in the studio and I'm going to show you how this translates on a whiteboard, so you're going to see exactly what am I doing. Grab your guitar. Okay, don't do this without a guitar. Grab your guitar, try to follow along. It's much easier to learn music if you have an instrument in your hand. Okay, now the rhythm of this lick is excellent. I love it. It's a very nice rhythm. Now. It's excellent. It's not. Okay. It's not, to make a famous example, which is a great riff, but the rhythm is. Okay. And indeed, when other people play this song, they tend to put some variation. But anyway, I'm not going to that. Okay. Your rhythm is excellent. It's already recognizable, okay? Again, not in this case, but most great riffs have a very recognizable rhythm, okay? To prove that, I'm gonna clap a riff and you guys tell me what it is. Put it in the chat once you recognize it. Yep, already. Good. In the chat, Iron Man, okay? You don't even need the notes. The rhythm is so good, the rhythm is so recognizable, people already hear it, okay? Yeah. Your riff has already a good rhythm. Great. And now we change it, okay? If you know how to write music, like read and write music, do you know how to?
Yeah.
That's great, because you write this down and then you can shift the whole riff a quarter note later or earlier, or better, an eighth note earlier or later.
Ah, okay.
Or you reverse the whole thing. Notice you can reverse the rhythm but leave the notes the same.
Oh, yeah, I get you.
You see what I mean? So
yeah.
The order in which you play A, B, C, D, G, whatever stays the same, but you invert, you retrograde technically, the duration of every note. So if the last note was long, now the first note is long. The last note was short, now the first note is short, and so on and so forth, okay? Why do we do this in writing? Because doing this stuff in your mind is practically impossible. Okay?
Yeah, I'm just trying to do it in my mind. Just calm
Right,
down.
right. It's like, whoa. So, so that's a good reason to know how to read music. Okay,
Yeah.
when when you guys are out of ideas, start learning how to read music and do these kind of little tricks. Or you can take the notes inside the bar and change their order or change the order only of the rhythm
Mm.
and see where this takes you. Okay. So in that case, again, I cannot really retrograde the rhythm in my mind. Okay. But
Can you hear the fault in this melody? If you couldn't hear the fault, don't worry, that's what you're about to learn. And more importantly, you'll learn our rule for fixing this fault in the melodies you've already written and avoiding it in melodies you'll write in the future. But first, tea.
Hello, revolutionary music makers. I'm Kate Harmony, this is Ray Harmony, and welcome to Hack Music Theory.
The fast, easy, and fun way to make music.
If you're new to theory, or if you just want a refresher, then read our free book, 12 Music Theory Hacks to Learn Scales and Chords.
You'll be able to instantly apply these hacks to your songwriting and producing. So head on over to hackmusictheory.com right after this lesson and download your free PDF.
Alright, it's time to open your DAW to Hack Music Theory.
Firstly, just to clarify, a fault is not a mistake. Music is an art, so if you're making music from your heart, then there cannot be any mistakes. But when songwriters and producers don't understand theory, which is the grammar of music, they're not able to fully express themselves. Just like if someone was trying to write a poem in a language they didn't speak, the resulting work of art will undoubtedly have weaknesses, and a fault is defined as a weakness.
So, what's the fault in this melody? Well, it sounds completely lifeless, right? It's totally lacking in vital energy. What's causing that? Rhythm, or rather, a lack thereof. Unfortunately for rhythm, it's usually the overlooked element in a melody. Indeed, songwriters and producers often seem to forget that melody actually contains two elements, pitch and rhythm. To hear this in action, just listen to the New Music Friday playlist on Spotify every week. It's clear that the rhythms of most melodies are an afterthought, at best.
I've worked with countless songwriters and producers who've ended up at the horribly frustrating point of wanting to delete a melody because they just can't get it sounding right. Up until that point though, they'd spent all their time trying to fix the pitches, but they'd not once considered that maybe it's the rhythm that needs fixing. So after bringing their attention to the forgotten element of rhythm, a few small tweaks later, and they've fallen in love with the exact same melody they were about to delete. So next time you're frustrated and tempted to delete a melody, try experimenting with its rhythm instead and see if you can save it.
Now, you're probably wondering what exactly makes a good rhythm. Well, first, it's important to remember that a rhythm is a pattern in time. And just like with all other patterns, our human brains get bored if there's too much repetition, and they get overwhelmed if there's too much variety. Therefore, good rhythms, like all good patterns, enjoy a pleasing yet interesting balance of repetition and variety.
And most melodies these days do not have any problem with repetition. It's the lack of variety that causes their weakness. Variety in a melody is created by using many different note values and, most importantly, syncopation.
Syncopation is when you accent an offbeat and it puts a real spring in your melody's step, bringing it to life.
For example, in the first 3 beats of our rhythm, we move 2 on-beat notes to off-beats. The difference that this small tweak makes to our melody is truly unbelievable. You can hear it's already being revived, and we're only in the first bar.
And by the way, our example is in the key of A minor, which is all the white notes from A to A, and the tempo is 95 BPM.
Now, you're probably wondering how to tell if your melody's rhythm is boring. Easy, you give it the one note test. You see, removing the pitch element of your melody will expose its rhythm. In other words, if your
Hello, I'm James Harvey, the professor of music theory at the College of Southern Nevada with 5-Minute Music Theory. We'll start the timer and we're going to talk in this video about what are known as hidden or direct intervals. I'll put hidden and then in parentheses direct. These are the same thing, just different terminologies. So hidden intervals are called hidden because it's the effect of parallel or forbidden parallels, but they're somewhat hidden in the texture when this happens. So for hidden intervals to occur, we need to meet 3 criteria. Now, when writing, it's very easy to accidentally write hidden intervals, but when doing error detection, they're pretty easy to find because the first step that we need to have here is a leap in the soprano. So if there's no leap involved, if the soprano is moving by step, then there's no error there as long as we're looking for these hidden intervals. If there's a leap in the soprano and the soprano and bass are moving in similar motion, not parallel, but similar motion, then that's 2 out of 3 criteria met to create hidden intervals. And then the last is that the resulting interval, resulting in a harmonic perfect fifth or perfect octave. And for hidden intervals to occur, all 3 of these criteria must be met. So let's see here. I'm going to write one like this. We'll go from a C, we'll go up to a G here. So that's going to be our perfect fifth. That's going to be the resulting interval. And then I'm going to move from a B, and I'll move the bass like this. So here's an example of a direct or hidden fifth. So what's happening is we have a leap in the soprano. There's the leap. My terminology is leap means anything larger than a step. Sometimes you'll see skip or leap, but really it's when there's anything larger than a step is what we have to worry about here. So we do have that happening in the soprano. The soprano and bass need to move in similar motion. And if we look at the motion here, we have, they are moving at least the same direction. The first interval is a fourth, and then that's moving into a fifth. So they are moving in similar motion. The resulting interval is a harmonic perfect fifth. So here's the error. That's a direct interval, and you would get a nice red slash through that if you were turning that in an assignment. The same thing happens for perfect octaves, and let's go ahead and do a perfect octave, and let's go the opposite direction. Let's go like this. I'm going to make that soprano. It's going to crash into my direct, but that's fine. And then I'm going to move from a C like this and an E like this. This is a hidden octave because we do have a leap in the soprano from the C to the F. The soprano and the bass are moving in similar motion, and the resulting interval is a perfect octave. And yes, it's the simple interval equivalent of a perfect octave, which essentially is a perfect octave. So just a quick summarization here of hidden or direct intervals. It's these 3 criteria which are on the screen. There needs to be a leap in the soprano, and the soprano and bass moving in similar motion, resulting in a harmonic perfect fifth or perfect octave. And remember, this is considered an error. It's the same effect as forbidden parallels. It really is of the same. It's just hidden in the texture and a little bit harder to see. And when you're doing error detection, you don't have to worry about any of the chords unless there's a leap in the soprano, that first criteria met. But when you're part writing, be really careful about this, especially when you're writing your melody line and these leaps. That's why it's best to try to keep things as stepwise as you can. Thank you. Hello, I'm James Harvey, the professor of music theory at the College of Southern Nevada with 5-Minute Music Theory. This is going to be a brief overview video which is going to lead into a rather large series of videos regarding part writing rules. So a lot of what you learn in the first semester or two in music theory is about part writing rules. Now, we've learned everything that we know in order to get to this point. We've learned about SATB format. We know about chord spellings and stuff like that. So now we're going to learn how to do part writing in 4 parts in SATB format. There are a lot of rules, so I'm going to preface this by saying a few things. First of all, don't be turned off by all of these rules. You need to learn all the rules before you can learn when to break them and why to break them. And then I should also, when I say rules, I should put rules in quotes, because it's not like somebody wrote down somewhere that this must be this way. It's just that throughout the years of music history, composers really started to figure out what worked, and then the music theorists later, after the art had been created, went back to figure out why did it work. So it's really important to remember that when composing, composers don't compose from a music theory perspective. Music theory is what comes afterwards. Now, of course, composers know about chords and instrumentation and all that stuff, but it's not like they are approaching a piece of music from a music theory perspective. The music theory comes afterwards to figure out why things work. And then once we figured out why things worked, then we teach our music students how to get things to work that way. And we also have to keep in mind that these rules were all applied primarily during the Common Practice period, which was from 1600 to 1900 AD. So we've passed that border quite a while ago. So we have to keep that in mind as well, because some of the rules are intended to keep a certain sound from happening, or keep certain sounds strong versus weak, and our modern ears might hear things differently than ears would have heard it hundreds of years ago during the Common Practice period. So you're going to learn a lot of things that might sound frustrating, that you might think, well, why do we need to do this? There are reasons that we need to do this. It's not because of us evil music theory teachers forcing this upon students. Now, there's going to be a lot of rules, and I'm going to try to separate the rules into specific videos along the way, because this is really very important that we learn all these part writing rules, and also to learn why we need to know these part writing rules, and when to apply them, when not to apply them. And really, to start off at this point, I should just say apply these rules to everything that you do. And then when we get into more advanced theory and advanced music, then we'll talk about when you can sort of break these rules. It's more like bending the rules instead of breaking them. But let's go ahead and dig in the next handful of videos, rather large handful, but it's going to be a nice group of videos on these part writing rules. Thank you. Hello, I'm James Harvey, the professor of music theory at the College of Southern Nevada with 5-Minute Music Theory. This is going to be the final video in the short series on figured bass symbols. I'm going to start by showing you a neat little mnemonic device that we can use to help remember all the figure bass symbols before they just sort of bury themselves into your brain naturally. So I'm going to show all of these figure bass symbols, starting with triads first. So triads, we have our root position, we have first inversion, and we have second inversion over here. The root position was blank, nothing there. First inversion was a 6, second inversion 6-4. Dotted line, and then seventh chords. We had root position, first inversion, second inversion, third inversion. And these versions, a few more numbers. Root position was a 7, first inversion 6-5, second inversion was 4-3, I'm running out of space, and then 4-2, the last one. So that seems like a bit of a mess, a whole bunch of numbers. So I'm going to help to uncomplicate this a little bit. Now, how can we remember all these numbers? Well, if we look at them all together and we count how many digits there are, starting with the 6, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 numbers here. What's a good way to remember 10 numbers? Phone number. We're sort of naturally programmed now to remember phone numbers, although not as much as in the past because our phones sort of remember the phone numbers now. Let's take those triads and turn them into an area code, 664. And then we're going to take the rest of the phone number as the 7th chords, 765, 4342. The BPS hotline number. If you can remember this phone number, you can remember all the figured bass symbols, or BPS, standing for bass position symbols. We have our root position being blank. We have our first inversion, 6. Here's the 6-4 first inversion. Second inversion, I mean. And here's the 7, 6-5, 4-3, 4-2. So if you're having a hard time remembering all these, try to commit this phone number to memory. 664-765-4342. It won't take that long to remember that. It's just like committing a phone number to memory. So it's sort of an interesting way to remember a lot of these figure bass symbols. Just a little trick that I found that sort of helps. All right, I'm going to clear some space here. We're going to go back to the staves, and we're going to show a few of these chords, what they look like using figure bass, just because we have a little bit of time remaining. Clear every little nice little thing off of there. Okay, head back over here. Got to change from my fat pen to my normal pen. And let's do some chords using a grand staff, nice messy grand staff. How about let's do the key of B flat major, 2 flats. And I'm going to slide this up just a little bit. That's not what I want. I want this so I can slide it up. Perfect. So we're going to take a chord in B flat major and we're going to use all 3 forms of analysis that we've learned as of yet. I'm going to take an E flat triad in first inversion. So I'm going to write a G here and I'll put an E flat in this voice, which is in the key signature, so I don't need the accidental. And then I'll put a B flat and an E flat up here. So if we collect all the pitches, we see that there's an E flat, there's a G, and there's a B flat, which is an E flat major triad over G if we're using our chord symbols. And then if we use Roman numerals, E flat is the 4th scale degree in B flat major, and it's a major triad. So we would write an uppercase Roman numeral 4. This is a triad in first inversion, so we add the 6 to it. Now we have just about everything that we need to know about that triad using all these forms of analysis. Now typically when you're doing music theory homework or you're learning music theory, you just use a combination of Roman numerals and bass position symbols, or figured bass symbols I should say. But the chord symbols can be especially useful when we get into more advanced concepts. But here's an example of a diatonic triad showing all 3 forms of analysis. Really, like I said, it tells us all that we need to know. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Gareth Green. Now, I don't know about you, but I absolutely love the music of Debussy. It's so evocative and mysterious, isn't it? And it would be interesting, wouldn't it, just to think about, well, how does Debussy achieve that? He's such an interesting composer because he's in that interesting era, beginning of the 20th century, when we've been through this tonal crisis, having lived with major and minor keys quite happily for 300 years. The whole system has kind of started to crumble. So some people carry on writing in major and minor keys quite happily. Elgar, Sibelius, composers like that. Other people have gone in different directions, like Schoenberg and serialism, making every semitone of the scale kind of equal, so there's no predominance of one note over another in the chromatic scale. Stravinsky and neoclassicism kind of looking back and saying, what can we reclaim from earlier times and present in a new kind of way? There are all sorts of other developments going on as well, aren't there? Jazz, just to name one of them. Later on, minimalism, all sorts of things, that different threads that flow from that kind of crisis, if you like, of the breakdown of tonality. And Debussy finds a fascinating way of dealing with it, because Debussy doesn't necessarily write in a particularly dissonant style. When you listen to Debussy, there's often a lot about it that's actually very consonant. But at the same time, it's very difficult to pin him down to a key. Sometimes you can say, well, I can see that and hear that this is a chord of C major, and then that this is a chord of F sharp major. So you get those kind of effects in Debussy. Whereas you look at it and you think, well, C major, F sharp major, they've got nothing to do with each other. I can see that's a chord of C major, I can see that's a chord of F sharp major, and Debussy simply says, well, I like this C major chord, I like this F sharp major chord. I'm not really going to worry about how they function in relation to each other. It's not a progression in C major or F sharp major or anything. It's just, here's a colour of a C major chord, here's another colour of an F sharp major chord. So we often associate this word colour with Debussy because he's often using chords in that kind of colourful way. Chords that are often consonant but unrelated to each other. In other words, what we call non-functional harmony. But there are other things that he does as well. And that's why I thought we'd have a look at this particular piece today, Voile. And in this prelude, very famous prelude of Debussy, he uses the whole tone scale. So we'll have a look at the music in a minute and see just how he does that, what the whole tone scale is and all the rest of it. But just for now, let's have a flavour of the music. It goes something like this.